Wonderful. So hello, everybody, and welcome, of course, to the faculty-led program session. We're excited to be with you here today as we discuss best practices and approach to creating international experiences for your students. So my name is Lindsay. I've had the pleasure of working with WorldStrides for over 5 years. My position is in program development, where I've had the honor to work with faculty members to create programs for the undergraduate population. And I'm joined by my colleague, Lauren, who can introduce herself as well.
Yeah, hi everybody. Great to be here talking with everybody today. So I personally specialize in the program development for graduate level programs. And I've had the honor of working with Dr. Hove in CBU's MBA programs for the last few years. I've been with WorldStrides for almost 12 years now, which is kind of hard for me to believe. But yeah, I love what we do and happy to partner with people like you to help your students see the world.
Great. So again, thank you for being here. We will dive into the agenda just for the session today, touching on key topics that will hopefully illuminate the process for creating an international experience. And I know that Garrett is also planning to comment on the proposal process on campus as well towards the end of our session. And then of course, at the end, we'll open it up for Q&A towards the end of the session.
So the focus on this presentation is really going to be for 2022 programs and beyond, realizing that, of course, 2020 programs have been largely disrupted by COVID, and we see COVID, of course, impacting programs at least for the first half of 2021. So we're kind of focusing on the future, and the long-term effects of COVID are still to remain seen. But we just wanted to mention, of course, since it's the large elephant in the room now, that COVID is still something that, of course, we're monitoring very, very closely. And our risk management team has assembled a back-to-travel task force that closely monitors countries for border reopenings and quarantine requirements and procedures. So we're going to get through this together. But again, the focus of this presentation is going to be on the future. So we're not going to talk too specific about COVID, but of course, if you have questions about that, we can address those at the end.
Great. So we thought it'd be helpful to touch on study abroad trends and how they relate to short-term experiences. Are on average across the United States, short-term programs, many of which are faculty-led programs, make up about 65% of a university's portfolio. That percentage is on the rise year after year. Of course, students are still participating in semester and year-long experiences as well, but short-term programs really do open the door for students who maybe are working, have families or other obligations stateside, along with student populations that aren't able to participate in long-term programs. These types of experiences really make it more accessible for students who might not otherwise have a chance to study abroad. So let's take a look at what students value most in terms of, when they're considering a study abroad experience. Close interactions with peers and faculty members, affordability, experiential learning. We've seen that be a huge draw to students. Those are among a few points that students find to be most appealing when they're evaluating which experience to participate in. And of course, these are all key points that fortunately short-term experiences do offer students.
And just a little bit about our organization for those of you that aren't familiar. We are very diverse. So we have specialized divisions from soccer and performing arts to service learning, career exploration, semester-long study abroad. And then the division that Lindsay and I represent, custom programs, works exclusively with colleges and universities on short-term faculty-led programs. So the nice thing about this is that the scope and scale of our various divisions allow us to kind of leverage our resources across our divisions and provide more resources to our university partners. And this slide is just a quick snapshot of some of our numbers that we're very proud of. So we operate programs in 110 countries. We have 400 plus university partners around the world. Our global experiences team, which we'll talk about more in a little bit, has planned over 7,200 engagements since 2012, and we have over 50 years experience in the industry. So again, if you have questions about our organization as a whole, we just want to give you a little snapshot of who we are.
Great. So as an organization, we've strengthened the things that we're really known for, and we're continuing to work at innovating in these critical areas. Our intentional approach to program development allows us to collaborate with faculty members to design an itinerary that meets your learning objectives. Our unparalleled logistical and risk management support delivers peace of mind, no matter what the destination is. So the support that we offer for programs is turnkey, from logistical arrangements to academic content, and beyond. So there are a number of considerations of program development you want to think about as you explore the possibility in creating a program for your students. So let's start with academic goals. What are the academic goals for your program? How do you want them to be achieved?
So one thing we say a lot internally is, and you'll hear us say, is we want to develop short-term programs for long-term impact. And so how do you do that? So experiential learning, we're going to dive into each of these a little bit further, but experiential learning is key, really this concept of learning by doing, connecting culture to your academic visit to provide context, making sure you're carving out time within your program for reflection time. It's so easy to go throughout the day and not really find time to pause and reflect on what you're learning. So that's so important. And of course, the development of soft skills. So incorporating activities to help develop those soft skills. So we'll dive into each of these a little bit.
Yeah, so interaction, of course, is the key to learning in these types of experiences. Whether your focus is business, engineering, education, healthcare, what be it, the best programs visit the organizations where people are practicing that subject area. So to support the needs for these kinds of visits, we've pioneered a team to help plan them. They're called our Global Experiences team. That team is solely focused on sourcing customized engagements for your students that will create, the long-term impact changes that Lauren was talking about. So anybody can go to a tour, a public tour of a factory or see a museum. You want these types of experiences to facilitate meaningful engagement rather than maybe a canned HR presentation or something like that. So some of the specific things that our global academic team does is they really work to customize the engagement to your learning objectives. So we take extra care to make sure that the interactions are designed for your group. Our team works hand in hand with faculty members to understand the learning objectives of the engagement and paired, of course, with the course content, and then sources these visits to align with those goals. The engagements are customized so that students walk away with a very meaningful encounter, in-country encounter. So our executive groups often meet with the company's leaders, and sometimes our undergraduate groups do that as well. But often we prefer undergraduates to meet with a director or maybe somebody that's closer to their age group and more representative of what life would be like for your students in that country. And then we encourage our speakers to build in some personal time during the visit. To have an open conversation with the students, so that it's not just a presentation, it's more of a dialogue between students and speakers. And then also to prepare students for these types of interactions in country, we like to provide specific information about etiquette. It's just a little thing that can go a long way, of course. For example, many of you know that, when you're visiting, when you hand a business card to a contact in China or other Asian countries, you use both hands rather than just one hand. It's those little things that can really make a huge difference, when participating in engagements like this in country.
And that's a good segue into kind of diving into the culture to provide context to your organizational visit. So it might seem obvious to some of you that you really need to carve out that time that's not spent on curriculum specific learning. But those cultural activities are so important to provide context to help kind of connect the dots, help connect, why the speaker was so formal in this market and not so formal in this other one, or the business card example that Lindsay mentioned. But it's really important for your students to know the country and understand the culture where you are. If possible, we recommend doing some cultural activities when you first land before jumping into your organizational visits, just because that helps to kind of frame the rest of the program and set the tone. And it creates a lot of understanding that helps students ask better questions later on. And anytime, again, going back to this concept of experiential learning, anytime those activities can be interactive, that's what we always encourage. So getting off the bus and taking public transportation, if it's appropriate and safe. We plan a lot of cooking classes, dance classes, and other kind of interactive activities like that for our groups. And community service projects, again, we'll touch on this more in a little bit, but are such a popular way to provide some context and insights into some societal challenges and issues that that country is facing, while also, connecting with the local people and giving back to the communities that you're visiting. So, and I know that, of course, is an important part of CBU's mission as well.
Great. So we talked a little bit about reflection previously, but of course, this is another key point to consider when you're planning your program. So planning for intentional reflection, with students to increase the likelihood that they'll be able to retain what they've learned, take advantage of opportunities, on the program, such as coach time between locations, to host discussion, conversations with students, maybe hosting short-term debrief sessions back at the hotel, maybe in an informal space like a breakfast room, where that's possible, just helps facilitate those conversations while you're on the program itself. And then, of course, hosting debrief sessions once you return to the States really can help solidify those opportunities for students.
Yeah, and so again, expanding on that, intentional reflection can give students a platform to practice their soft skills that they gain from their study abroad experience. So according to IIE and NACE, these are the core competencies that employers value most. So when planning your program, we encourage you to incorporate opportunities to put these critical skills to the test. So when IIE surveyed students who study abroad, one of the common threads of soft skills gain became really apparent. Post-travel, students cite an increase in openness, curiosity, problem solving, decision making, and communication. So again, all very important skill sets to help prepare them for their careers. And then kind of moving on to program development from a destination selection standpoint. So again, this is incredibly important, and I know many of you come to your provider, to WorldStrides, already having an idea of where you want to go. But of course, you want to make sure that your destination ties into your learning goals and your curriculum, is affordable, if of course budget is an issue for most programs, and also is a destination that students are going to be excited to go to. That you don't want them to be scared or hesitant or just not interested in the destination. So there's a lot of factors to consider. This study, we just wanted to show this slide. This was an interesting study, again, done by IIE, that found that students gained, of course, curiosity and openness from their study abroad, but it found that choosing a less familiar destination can help the students gain these soft skills faster and have a more direct impact on their skill development by exposing them to a less similar culture from their home culture versus a culture that was very familiar. So kind of the message is that we like to suggest is choose a destination that's a little bit outside the comfort zone. Again, you're not going to want to go so far out the comfort zone that your students are scared to leave the hotel room, but you definitely want to kind of push them outside of their bubble.
Yeah, so unfortunately, I love this slide because it does highlight the breadth of what we're able to accomplish in terms of location. So fortunately, we are able to travel to a lot of those really unique destinations that create a long-term impact for students. This means that if your curriculum allows it, you have the flexibility to push your students out of their comfort zones, like Lauren was talking about. There are a lot of factors, of course, in selecting a destination, but we work closely with faculty partners to understand where that line is for students. Of course, we don't want to get, like Lauren was saying, too far over the line where students are uncomfortable, but we do want to push it so they are, getting out of their comfort zone a little bit. So please note, of course, this map does highlight locations that where we normally would travel to in any given normal year. Currently, of course, the situation is a little bit different, and there are some restrictions imposed by COVID that we see for this upcoming year.
Shifting gears a little bit, moving on to inclusive program design. So again, we realize that this is becoming a more and more important part of what you're hearing on campus, and of course has been integrated to an important part of our program development process. So this next slide talks about best practices for inclusive programming. So again, just making sure that you're approaching your program with this in mind. So choosing speakers that represent different perspectives, identities, and viewpoints. Before traveling, prepare your students with cultural perceptions of identities, race, gender, class, sexuality, again, so that they're thinking about these things and prepared to kind of notice these similarities and differences. We all see diversity differently based on our own backgrounds and life experiences, but really understanding that lens from which you view diversity can help shine a light on potential biases and help make intentional choices when developing your program. WorldStrides has a vice president of diversity, equity, inclusion, and she's fantastic and happy to work with any of you, directly or as another faculty workshop to talk more in depth about DEI within your university.
Yeah, so going hand in hand with that, of course, part of creating inclusive programming is ensuring students understand the financial support that's available to them. So we do have a few WorldStrides scholarship options available to students to help finance their education abroad experience. We offer scholarships, for students that are on financial aid on campus. They're first come, first served basis, but we do offer that support. And we also offer a number of merit-based scholarships as well. And I'd be more than happy to provide more information about how those work as well, if there's interest. So lastly, let's take a look at a few tools that help measure success and learning outcomes for these types of programs. Measuring long-term impact can be tough. There are a few tools that help measure a program success among your students. There are a few listed here that you can take a peek at. Some of them are free. The value rubric, I believe, is a free tool that you can use. The IDI tool, I know, it is a paid tool that you can use, but it is a great rubric to assess long-term impact. And then, of course, creating pre and post program rubrics on your own can really have a lasting effect on assessing those kinds of learning outcomes for your students as well.
All right, so switching gears, we're going to talk a little bit about our risk management support. So this is one of the 3 pillars that Lindsay mentioned earlier, and something that, of course, WorldStrides takes extremely seriously, as does your university. WorldStrides takes a 3-pronged approach to risk management, so including risk avoidance, risk mitigation, and crisis management. So we believe that a lot of times crises can be prevented if, we take the right steps to vet local suppliers and destinations and avoid that risk altogether. But this slide just touches on some of our resources from a risk management perspective. We have a 24/7 tour central office that's staffed by WorldStrides staff. It's not outsourced to a third party. We have an emergency on-call phone. And of course, local phone numbers you can call in case of emergency on the ground. So preparing you with a lot of emergency numbers. We have offices in 30 countries. We have a doctors on call program through our partnership with George Washington University Medical Center, where participants and faculty can call and reach a US-based doctor any time of day or night and get a second opinion or advice on a medical situation if need be while you're traveling. We also partner with WorldAware for more serious situations that might require evacuation of a group or a participant. And we have a lot of tools that we provide our program leaders with in terms of emergency preparedness maps and protocols, advisory memos. Our risk team is getting these daily, sometimes multiple times a day for different countries as there's, issues that arise like civil unrest or natural disasters or even small incidents that we just want our groups to be aware of. And then we register all of our participants for the US State Department STEP program. And we have a mobile app, which we'll talk about more in a minute, that is really fantastic and just allows you to have all of this information, not just your itinerary details, but all this risk management information at your fingertips. And then this next slide just talks about our embedded insurance policy. So I'm not going to go into detail about this now. All of our proposals will include information on this, but we just wanted to let you know that we do have embedded insurance for all of our participants. And we've actually increased the levels in recent years. And we realized with COVID kind of changing the landscape, these protections are going to be more important than ever before. And just one thing to point out, this does cover mental health as well.
So Lauren mentioned earlier our app. So this is another service that we offer that students really take advantage of and really love. The WorldStrides app allows students to see their day-to-day itinerary and any changes that need to be made can be made in real time. We're also able to utilize the app, as Lauren was mentioning, to upload any other important critical documents that may be relevant for the program. The risk management information is hosted on the app. So students have the information at their fingertips if something were to happen. Emergency contact details are all included in the app. We're also able to utilize the app to upload any important academic information that you might want students to have on their program, from curriculum to debrief questions, project information. All of those documents can be placed on the app so that students just have, all of the information at their fingertips while on the program. So, of course, this tool helps the program run smoothly and students have easy access to the information they might need at any point during the program. It's been a really fantastic, tool that students have really enjoyed using. So now in terms of the planning process, we wanted to include a snapshot of what we've seen in terms of a successful planning process on our end with other universities that we work with. So, recommended to get started early on in terms of planning the program. This is what's worked best for other institutions, but of course, we're very flexible. So if there's something that works better for your timeline, we'd be more than happy to adjust as needed. But this is the timeline that we've seen, ideally be quite successful in terms of planning the program. I do want to mention that especially for undergraduate programs, recruitment is a big piece of the development process. So leaving a substantial amount of time to get the word out to your students, hosting information sessions, and really getting students the information they need early on so that they can plan, with enough time to make this happen for themselves. Oh, so we're going to talk a little bit about a couple of case studies that we'd like to present, just so you can get an idea of what a program might look like.
Yeah. So for those of you that aren't familiar with leading a program, as Lindsay said, we just want to provide a couple examples. So this particular one was an engineering program in South Africa for University of Pittsburgh. So I know it's some fine print there. We're happy to show these slides after, but this case study this program offered students an understanding of local engineering projects that had an impact on the surrounding community and environment. And students met with organizations at the forefront of environmental protection and sustainable use of these resources. We made sure to integrate a lot of cultural highlights into the program as well. So students were able to visit, Soweto and the Apartheid Museum, a mine, Robben Island, and the District 6 Museum. So, for more examples, Lindsay's going to run through a couple other ones, but we're always happy to provide you with sample itineraries if you're just looking for an idea based on a certain learning theme or based on, what we've done in a certain destination. Please never hesitate to reach out to us and we can provide those sample itineraries.
Yeah, exactly. So these are just examples that we've run with other universities, and more than happy to provide those examples specific to your program as well. So this is another interesting case study. This program highlights, this case study highlights what can be done from a service standpoint. This program was focused on service learning throughout the Peru experience. We partnered with local organizations to allow students to work with school-aged children and youth development group that focuses on keeping teens off the streets in Peru. Students stayed with homestay families during this program, allowing for an even deeper cross-cultural awareness experience. And of course, students were also able to visit the must-see cultural sites that really complemented their service project throughout the experience. Another fascinating program that we've supported, this one was a focus on women's studies. So this program provided students a firsthand understanding of organizations working with women and children to end violence in the region and poverty and inequality as well. We helped set up visits to a number of unique organizations for this program, including women's shelters, resource centers. I think we had a children's home in this one, and a conversation with a leader of female monks, which was really interesting. So to dive a little bit further into service projects, I'd say perhaps the single deepest impact activity that we like to recommend is this experience. Service projects, really help illuminate a location for students and help in terms of giving a little bit of civic responsibility to giving back during the program. So of course, there are a lot of wonderful short-term programs that focus entirely on service learning. But even if you have other learning objectives on the program, many of our partner universities will tie in a component, maybe an afternoon or a morning for service project. Our global experiences team will identify an organization that meshes really well with the other learning objectives for the program and to provide students the opportunity to see, another facet of their host country while they're there.
So another experiential engagement that we love to offer is what we call local market immersion. So this is another great way to connect culture with academics. So in this case, we'd break your group up into smaller subgroups and have them visit pre-assigned locations within the city, either accessible via public transportation or on foot. And at each location, students will receive a list of questions to consider to help them kind of think critically about what they're seeing, whether it be a local market or pharmacy or bank or what have you. And the nice thing about this is all of these engagements are customized. So depending on your program curriculum, we can tie each of the assigned locations back to your learning theme to make sure that each of the stops are very relevant to your group. Again, like we've been driving home that the whole idea of debrief and reflection is so important, especially for activities like this, just to make sure students are kind of connecting the dots to what they've been learning throughout the course of the program.
Yeah. So those are just a couple of examples of the types of engagements we're able to put together. Of course, we have a whole suite of different experiences that we're able to tie into programs, be it guest lectures, service learning projects, company visits, more Q&A sessions, panel discussions. We have many different types of engagements that we can include, but these are just a two that we wanted to spotlight, for the time being. So what's next? Here are a few tips and tricks in terms of how to get started, some key information that we would need in order to start planning a program. The program theme or the area of study, destination, of course, we can always discuss what would be an appropriate destination for the program if you're unsure, program dates, group size, all those details are really important as we start thinking about a program. So then we have my contact information and Lauren's contact information here as well, so we can discuss further. So we wanted to turn it over as well to Garrett, who wanted to comment a little bit on the proposal process on campus, and then we can wrap up with some questions and Q&A session.
Yeah, thanks, Lindsay. Lindsay, would you mind going back to the previous screen?
Oh.
So it's pretty similar to what happens on the CBU side of things, but basically how to move forward with like a program like this. So there's a couple basic steps. Lindsay was sharing, really look into the theme or the area of study, your objectives, where you want to go, dates, but it's basically always done, a year in advance. So our proposal deadline is always March 1st, and this coming March is for fall 2021 and spring and summer 2022. So basically you have to have there's a lot of time, there's a big time window from proposing to planning, and it all makes sense because there's a lot of logistics that go into it. So if you guys are interested in something like this, you can reach out to me and I'm happy to connect you to some resources as well, kind of walk you through what it looks like on the CBU side of things. But the proposal's all online. It's all through Teradata. If you guys have ever checked out that platform, there's quite a bit of logistics that we want to make sure gets figured out. If you're working through, WorldStrides and Lindsay and Lauren, for instance, they're going to help you put together a lot of that logistical information. What do flights look like? What does the itinerary look like? Dates, all of that good stuff. But also make sure that you're checking with your dean or your chair, getting them approved on, like running that idea by them, getting their buy-in. But also, reach out just because I know of different faculty that are maybe trying to go at it alone, or they have existing programs set up. And sometimes when you're just starting out, it can be pretty challenging. So just remember the March 1st deadline, and there's a proposal on the CBU side of things, at least a year in advance. You know what, I actually did have a question from one of our faculty, Monica. Monica, it's good to see that you joined our session. So her question was more on how do you set up a course? How do you tie that? How do you tie, a WorldStrides trip to academic credit? So Monica and anyone that's wondering about this, that is kind of a process as well, and that's kind of why we have that have faculty start at least a year in advance. For instance, Dr. Hope's program, it's set up a little bit different. It's kind of built into, their whole trip is built into the actual fees, and it's a requirement of the program. But the way a lot of faculty do it, they have taken an existing course and they basically add a G section to it that students can enroll in. And a lot of times financial aid can apply to that global practicum, and they'll get credit for that as well. But it can be tricky depending on, you know, what field it is, what discipline. So online course, like an online ops could be really tricky to set up. I know Dr. Garrett is one of the professors that's working on that at the moment. But yeah, does anyone have any questions?
Yes, we wanted to open up to questions. And again, if there, like Lauren said earlier, if there are any specific destinations or program themes that you'd like to see, you know, example itineraries for, we'd be happy to share that information as well afterwards.
I don't have a problem if any of you want to reach out to me. I can explain in detail what I'm doing, and I've done predominantly. I'm pretty sure I've done all my programs through WorldStrides, so I can tell you some of the things that I've looked for and how they've helped me do that and bring that to fruition. And I don't know, just reach out to me.
And Tat, thank you very much, Garrett, for answering my question. And Tat, so you're saying that you embed the fees into your program?
Yeah, it's part of the per unit fee. And so basically in the MBA program, they come in and whatever their regular course fee is, their academic part, then there's a fee that's on top of that. I believe it's $125 per unit now. And what that does is there's going to be students that can't afford to pay for the trip if they have to pay for it all at once. And so when we did the fee thing, that's to be able to allow that to just naturally happen. Obviously, you know, it can come through your financial aid and what have you. But the nice thing is you don't have to track all that. You don't have to worry about who's paid and who's got it done and, you know, who's going to go or who's not going to go. I just know that everybody's going to go in week 6 of G1 in their 545 class. And I already know my trips 3 years out, and it's just systemically about as good as it gets. And then whenever I do something wrong, Garrett makes sure that I know that and I fix it, and then we move forward. And I think I've gotten better, though. Garrett's smiling. I don't know if you agree with me, but I think I've gotten
great job.
I've gotten better at the process. I did take Garrett to Brazil, so he saw, you know, the good, the bad, and the ugly of my trips. I need to get better at debriefing. I'm not that good at that. But it's a learning experience, and it's amazing to have, and I won't talk too much, but to be in line to get your passport stamped, and to see a group of students standing huddled in a circle on the other end of that line on the opposite side there, and your first inkling is that, oh my gosh, something's wrong. But then you get over there and they're all just beaming because it's the first stamp of their brand new passport. And they just think that's the greatest thing in the world. And we haven't even got into anything else. So I encourage all of you, if there's any way you can put it in your programs, you saw the statistics, it's a huge seller. And, you know, talking about, you know, getting a student to come up and really tell you how much they enjoyed this and how much it just blew their mind that they'd never expected this. Or we did a church thing that Garrett set up in Brazil, where I gave 2 lectures in a church, and how all the students were able, some of them didn't, but most of them were able to interact and really get to know people and make like friendships and stuff. I had one student that got an internship in Hong Kong from New Balance. And I tell them all the time, if you have a business card, bring them. I'm not shy about approaching that part of it. And so it's interesting. You will love it. It is work. I'm not going to tell you it's all, you know, rainbows and ponies, but you know, the bottom line is you do it. The cooking class is the best. I totally recommend do a cooking class. That is the most fun. But again, if you have any other questions, feel free to just reach out.
Thank you.
Thank you,
I love
Tad.
that story about the passport. Yeah, I've been there as well, and it's really cool to see students just
Oh, yeah.
illuminating. Yeah, it's really neat.
I believe Phil had chatted a question about the engineering program example. So Phil, I can send you, more details about their specific itinerary. I know this was a little bit of a longer program. I think they had a 17-day program. But to answer your question, it was a blend of cultural and academic visits. So I think they met with various organizations and companies to hear about just market entry, things kind of on the business side into South Africa, but also looking about or learning about engineering with a purpose. And that, they saw their kind of innovative approach to wastewater treatment facilities and whatnot. So to answer your question, it was a blend. But if you're looking for more specifics, let us know, and happy to maybe even send.
Yeah, Lauren, that would be good to have. It sounds exciting. It sounds fun, and certainly it's good exposure for the students to see how engineering is performed outside of the United States.
Sure.
However, if I'm truly going to incorporate it into a course towards their final objective, towards their graduation, it's really going to have include something that is on the technical side of it. It's going to have to enable the students to practice some of the theory that they put into place. And then I can see an alignment with a course.
So, Lauren, if I can jump in here.
Sure,
Hey, Phil,
please.
one of the things I do in my business ones is called a deep dive. And what we do basically is we have executives come in Brazil, it was an airplane company, and they just started their own airplane company. And we have the executives come in, they present the students with some kind of issue, like they want to get more global, or they, want to get more predominant domestically. And they present that situation with them. And then the students are put into teams, and they have to respond almost like a consultant. They have to respond to those prompts. And what I find is, first of all, students get real nervous, and then they kind of get upset with me because I'm pushing them too hard. But when they get through it, the experience that they get, because I keep telling them, if you make a mistake here, you're not getting fired for it. So just do it, do it to the best of your ability. And what I found is that's the best way to tie in the business world, that's the best way to tie the academic part into it. So you might want to consider, maybe a project or a consulting as an engineer, like a consulting type of approach.
Yeah. Thanks, Tad. And you and I have talked about this before, so I was familiar with it. When I saw this invite, I wanted to join up based on your recommendation. And it is something, we're launching a grad program that is related to leadership and related to management level type of thing, more so than a historical graduate program that might just be purely academic. So that's where I see some value in this. It would be great if that value could then translate into undergrad, because I think the undergrad students would just be thrilled to have this opportunity. So I'll get my feet wet and figure it out. But regardless, Lauren, I would like to see that University of Pitt itinerary.
Absolutely. And if I can look at some other good examples, I'll send them your way as well.
Great, thanks.
I think Amy put a question in the chat. She asked, does the fees change based on the length of the trip?
That's a great question. Yeah, so because everything we do is customized, we can work within a budget that works, for your students. A lot of times I like to understand what the budget restraints are on campus first, and then work backwards to create a program that aligns with those expectations that students have. So yes, to answer the question, it really just depends on how long, what the kind of services we're including. We can look into maybe some, logistical items that can bring costs down, like homestay families is a good way to give some affordability to the students, along with, of course, creating a really neat cultural experience as well. So yeah, the price does depend on the type of program that we're putting together. Great question.
I have another question.
Sure.
Garrett, this might be for you. Excuse my ignorance, but please remind me what the difference is with WorldStrides, ISP, and then you, Garrett, because I just want to make sure that I'm understanding each one. I believe ISP is more of the service project, but how does WorldStrides fit into these different facets of students' experiences? Yeah,
so think of it more in terms of ISP and then academic trips or academic experiences. So, if like the for instance, School of Business, they have their own trips that are maybe more business oriented. It's not necessarily a missions trip. So WorldStrides is really providing, they're like a third party for the academic side of things, not
Okay.
ISP. So that's kind of, think of it that way.
Okay, just wanted to make sure. I was trying to.
So there's a lot of different areas that it gets really confusing.
Okay.
Can
And
I
so,
piggyback on that one? So again, just to make sure, so the way that ISP has everybody buy their tickets and they do the location, they do all of those things, that's what WorldStrides does for the academic side of it. So we're not having to book the tickets and get the transportation, all of those things.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good way of looking at it. So basically all the logistics they're taking care of. They have contacts already in country. They create the program, the itinerary, can take care of the flights. They have an emergency response team 24/7. So they're really taking care of so many aspects of the actual trip planning and execution. They're really fantastic.
And one of the other things too, Amy and Monica both, is that they provide a, Lauren, what do you call the tour guide? Like, what do you call the person that goes with us?
Basically the local guide that's with you on the ground.
Local guide, yeah. So you have a local guide there. So like I have I asked that my local guide teach the students language. So like when you're on the tour buses, going from one place to another, and they're not all, falling asleep or whatever, you just have them teach them a language. And that's been fun. We sang happy birthday in German and Japanese, 2 different trips because of the local tour guide. We got 2 students out of, Chinese border isolation. They took them off to the side, thanks to the tour guide. That lady was very strong in demanding that they let those 2 students go through. But that I didn't really see that in the slides there, but that's a key thing. I mean, my local guides are legit. So that's another good thing for you guys that, may not be familiar with a country that you're going to. The local guide is perfect. And the students love it because the local guides will always tell them, these, based on what you're all about, this is where you should go. And they give them directions and maps, and really good about all of it.
Thank you, Ted. Yes, and I totally agree. I mean, a guide, as many of you can probably attest from personal experience, can really make or break your experience on the ground. So it's really important to have a guide that can connect and engage with your students and not just recite, facts about wherever you are. You really want somebody that can interact well. And so we thoroughly vet our guides. And if we have a bad experience with a guide, we take that very, very seriously. So we tend to repeat the same guides in our destinations that have been, the best rated guides. And as Ted said, I mean, the guides are there to be of service to you and are pretty much at your disposal to be as impactful, on your program as possible. So if there's something they're doing or not doing, they're always receptive to that feedback. So in Ted's example, if you want, your guide to speak and teach your students the local language during some downtime, like that's great, and so the more that we know about your expectations and wishes prior to departure, we can make sure the guide's prepared, but obviously they're there with you on the ground, so they can, pivot as needed while you're traveling too.
Quick question on the guides that sound wonderful. Do you have to use a guide, or like, could it be a combination of sometimes the guide there and sometimes they're not?
That's a great question. So it kind of depends on the country and of course your comfort as a program leader. So many of our program leaders like having the support of a local guide because again, they're local to that city and they know the ins and outs,
Great.
Traffic patterns and public transportation nuances and whatnot. So we think it's really helpful. And in some locations, we require a guide to accompany the group just due to safety and risk management. But there are some locations, London would be a great example where, program leader, if you're comfortable navigating London on your own, it's not required to have a guide there.
Okay, thank you.
Just so you know, Robin, I've been to Japan probably 60 times and I used a guide when Andrea and I went.
I can see a huge benefit, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, and the guide for budget reasons is with you for all group activities, but does not stay at the hotel with you. They'll drop you off and make sure that everybody gets in okay, and then we'll go back and then meet you the next morning before departure time. There are certain instances in China, we've seen this quite a bit, where the group, if you're visiting, let's say 4 cities in China, rather than having a local guide in each city, we've had a request to have the same guide with you, called what we call a national guide, so that you'll have the same point of contact throughout the entire experience. And Tad, I know that this was something that we discussed for one of your programs too, is that you wanted to have kind of the same point of contact throughout the whole program. So again, I mean, just let us know, you know, what you're thinking, and these are all things that we can talk through once we get into the nitty-gritty of planning a program.
I think Monica had a question about whether you guys do trips to Egypt, specifically the El Wadi sports camp.
So I'm not familiar. I personally haven't done a whole lot of programs to Egypt. So I'd have to check to see as a company if we've done anything there, but speaking from my own experience, I have not. Lindsay, do you?
I haven't personally worked on anything to Egypt either, but I have had that inquiry in the past. I know that we have put together programs in Egypt in the past. I just am not sure currently if we are, but yeah, so we can do some research and get back to you on that.
Thank you. Garrett knows that that's on my bucket list to get some students to CBU from CBU there.
That's on my list.
On my list too, yeah.
Well, if you ever have a university, I'll tell you, I've been there 6 times and it's been amazing. Yeah, I'm trying to get Amy to go over there as well.
Sure. Yeah. What is your discipline? Is there a specific program theme that you're looking at in terms of?
Well, Amy and I are in the college health science and kinesiology, health, promotion, physical education, you know, just everything kines related and health. So.
Great. Okay, I'll keep that in mind.
It's a beautiful, you should look it up. It's a beautiful place that they actually have rooms to stay in on site. And so it's about, you fly into Cairo and it's about I don't know, maybe 2.5 hour drive, but then everything's there. They have food, you don't have to even leave if you don't need to, but we always usually take like a day or so and go to like do the pyramids and things like that.
That sounds amazing. Awesome. Say it one more time. What is the name of the region?
It's El Wadi. Well, it's called El Wadi Sports Camp, and literally soccer's a really big deal there, and there's not a lot of grass, so they have tons of soccer fields, pools, skateboarding, ropes course. Everything you could think of. It's like I said, and they have like almost like a hotel, not American style type of hotel, but they have a place that you can stay. Okay. And it's very safe. They have guards and everything.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, if we do travel to Egypt, and that's a place that we'd be able to support, I don't see why we wouldn't be able to work with them. So yeah, that sounds fantastic. I'll look a little bit further into it.
Thank you.
Sure.
I had one question. So I'm looking at your guys' website, and I see that because you had sports on there. So again, College of Health Science, specifically kinesiology, but it looks like all of the sports ones are if you want to go and play sports. But do you have like sport management or athletic training or things that revolve around sports, but not necessarily us taking athletes?
I think what you might be looking at is the Excel division part of WorldStrides. So our division, yes, would focus more on exactly what you're talking about, more on kind of the management side. And from, again, my personal experience, I've worked with University of Oregon's sports management program for a number of years, and they go to a variety of different countries. But yeah, so our global experiences team can absolutely arrange organizational visits to fit your theme. So I don't know if we have anything on our website that speaks that exactly, but I think you might be looking at, the performing, not the performing division, but the athletic division. That you're right. It's more about playing sports and not the side of it.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I think Robin had a question on Christian conversation.
Sorry, I need to unmute. No, that was the genesis for my question about the guide. There's some conversations we might want to have about our Christian faith that might not sit well with certain guides in certain countries. And so I guess too, maybe matching, it could even be that if the guide, we could have that conversation in selecting the guide, perhaps.
Absolutely. Yep. Any information like that prior to program travel would be very important as we select a guide, but that is absolutely something that we could take into consideration. Sure.
Well, and even the guide that we had in Germany that took us to that church, I mean, she was like, well, she just like laid out the whole church. I mean, it was pretty interesting. And the church, oh my gosh, was beautiful. And so we sat in on a service, and you know, I had some students that didn't want to sit there, and that, you know, I just told them they had to. But when it was done, like when the service part was done, both those students were like really engaged with what was going on. But I give all the credit to the guide. The guide really set up what was going to happen in that particular situation. And then Garrett did the one obviously for Brazil. And I would say, and correct me if I'm wrong, Garrett, but majority of the folks really enjoyed, you know, that interaction, and the fact that, you know, like going to the church in Brazil looked like it was in an industrial area, and it was just this enclosed huge building sitting on a corner. You would have never guessed that it was a church per se. All the parking was inside. The students were just like, whoa, you know. So you kind of have to get unique in those, and how you design and pick those things.
And we can always share the bio of the guide in advance as well, just to help prepare you and your students too for their background and whatnot. But as Lindsay mentioned, if there's certain things that you're looking as far as, you know, religious affiliation or what have you, we can absolutely make sure that we're, you know, pairing you with the right guides.
Absolutely. No, I'm not worried about that. I think that'll be fine. Thank you though. That's perfect.
I have to jump off because IT is going to take my computer and put some applications on it. Again, I'll just throw out the invitation. If you guys have any questions that I can help with, please reach out. I have no problem sharing my itineraries and my pictures and my videos and all that kind of good stuff.
Thank you so much, Tad.
Sure, no problem. You guys have a great day.
Thanks, Dr. Hove, and thank you, Lindsay and Lauren, for hosting this.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Our pleasure. So again, if there's any other questions, information that you need, you know, example itineraries, just want to brainstorm, feel free to reach out to Lauren or I, and we can have that conversation.
Can I ask one quick question just before we leave, since I have all three of you right here? Sort of what Tad was just sharing too. And I mean, I don't know what WorldStrides holds or affiliates, but I mean, you do know that we're a Christian university. So do you provide guides that love the Lord, maybe as an added bonus to, you know, or to show us different places and things like that? Or is it more of just, we find it and then ask the guide to help us out?
That's a great question.
Go ahead, Lindsay.
I was going to say, so yes, we actually do have a component of WorldStrides that is a faith-based organization called Veritas. We work with them, you know, if the program is a faith-based program and those components of the program are really important to you, we can maybe partner with them, maybe do some kind of cross-division collaboration in terms of a program. That said, if we are not working with Veritas, is not in every destination. So if you're going to a very unique location that maybe Veritas isn't present, we can absolutely work with a guide, you know, so hopefully source a guide that would be, you know, willing to accommodate that as well. So it really just depends on the location, I think, you know, but we'd be more than happy to look into that. Absolutely.
Great. Thank you.
You know, Lindsay, if I can add on to that. So with Brazil earlier this year, it was like right before COVID, we went with, so Dr. Hove brought his MBA students there, and they were doing the typical, you know, the typical academic part where they're meeting with companies and there's a deep dive, and but the faith component is you know, pretty important to us. So WorldStrides was pretty flexible. We just wanted to build that part in. So I knew a local church there, and we kind of designed something where they could have a business outreach to the community, and the church partnered with us on that. And so that was kind of built into the program as like our custom thing we were designing on the side, but WorldStrides was able to accommodate that. So that there's ways we can work with WorldStrides on certain areas. So I think that is something that we want to see students be able to like visualize, and how do you live out your faith, but also your profession, you know, and combine that with service. So all three of those kind of components.
Yeah, and that actually goes to just any kind of content that you'd like on the program. I know a lot of faculty members do have contacts that they have in country that they want to utilize. So of course, we'd be more than happy to work with those contacts as well. So everything we do, because it's so customized, it's flexible based on what is appropriate for your program.
That's great. Thank you so much. I mean, again, I don't want my students to be in the Christian bubble. So Garrett, you're absolutely right. I want them to be able to see how their profession could be served as professionals, but then also as a ministry opportunity. So thank you so much. I appreciate your time and this opportunity to ask questions.